we always say structure first, people second.
Yeah.
And so our next two episodes are on structure and then people.
Awesome.
Which is very fitting while we wrap up the sort of 9 core competencies before moving into frameworks.
Cool.
We say structure first, people second.
Yep.
And we say structure is one of the most important things in an organization.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I think I've probably said this before, but to paraphrase Orwell, all tools are equal, but some tools are more equal than others. Ultimately, if we don't get structure right, then you'll never get the people right. Because, as we'll say in a second, structure first, people second. So the structure is how we divide and conquer. It's how we go out and decide what skills and experiences and competencies we need. It's how we decide who's responsible for doing what. It's and the structure needs to evolve as the company evolves through the stages of development. And in fact, structure informs the stages of development. So in my opinion, nailing the structure competency is actually one of the first things. If you genuinely are focused on building a great company, right? Something where someone would gladly come along and buy it from you and you'd be happy to sell it to them, or you could pass it on to the next generation with a lot of confidence. If that's the thing you want to buy and that's the story we're selling, and those are the people we want. We want ambitious founders who want to build stage 5 companies like that. You got to get structure. Because the better you are at structure, the better you are at managing human energy, the better you are at helping people work together, the better you are at hiring. I tend to look at everything through the eyes of trust, right? And so character, competency, and connection, right? Well, competency is all about, it manifests itself in the structure. So what are the competencies we need for right now, given who we are and where we're going, and so to me, like I say, structure, all being equal, is one of the most important tools, and it's actually like everything. I tend to say it's not as complicated as everybody makes it out to be. It's actually not that complicated, right? Getting structure right. So get structure right. Understand what it means. Understand the basic guiding principles associated with it, and then if you do it right, it makes building, running, and scaling an organization, I almost want to say infinitely easier. Obviously, that's not true, but it does. It just makes everything so much easier.
Well, it's not really easy. But it's doable, right?
It's totally doable,
right? And then when we say it's easy, it's like, it still takes a lot of effort to make it work and to implement that structure, but it enables you to grow at a sustainable rate. And when we say structure, then people, right? People, that's much more an unknown.
Oh yeah, it's much harder.
That's a lot less objective. So if you can put everything in the right place and create that solid foundation to then build off of, you're gonna have a much easier time
getting people
right and getting other things right. And especially when we talk about growth, right? Because you're setting yourself up for those next stages. So can
I make one more comment though on that? So when I say easy, I'm talking about for someone who should be building, right? And leading a company, right? For that person, for someone who's hopefully smart enough, confident enough, focused enough, passionate enough, right? Getting structure right, really, relatively speaking, is one of the easier things to do. And that's what I mean by easy.
And if you don't think that that's easy, then you're probably gonna have a hard time with the other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a hard guy coach when it comes to this moment in time, but that's what, when I say I think it should be easy, relatively speaking, to all the other stuff we do, because there's a lot of other stuff that's hard. Structure's relatively easy.
And if you view it as levels in a game, if you can't get that level right, this may not be the game for you. So
well put.
Or try a different game, right? But we talk about growth. How do the stages of development and everything impact the needs for organizational structure?
Yeah.
When do you really need to prioritize that and focus on it? before you start putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. Well, I think understanding the basics of structure, right? And not to be promoting us and our work, but if you just go into the 90 resources library and you look at our unstructured guide, it'll explain this stuff. And it's 25 pages and it's decent sized font and some pictures and diagrams and all that good stuff. But just understanding it from the very beginning, I think is super helpful because, the big idea behind structure is it's very much aligned with stages of development. So what do I mean more specifically? And by the way, it's all based upon the work of Elliot Jacks. And there's some other people who have similarly supportive work. I've been teaching this for a decade and it just works. So it's a time-tested best practice and principle, time-tested framework. So speaking of frameworks, when you start a business, right, the difference between a business and a company is basically, a company is something that can survive you as the leader, as the founder. When you start a business, right, if you get hit by the proverbial bus, the business dies. So when you're starting a business, one of the first things you're doing is proving product market fit, right? Now, maybe that's not the first thing you're doing, but first thing you're doing is just trying to figure out what the heck you're going to do and who you're going to serve and what you're going to sell and what you're going to build. But it's all about like day to day, week to week, month to month. So you're in this time span of responsibility that's just, like I said, day to day, week to week, month to month. And so that's the basic first layer of an organization. It has a time span of responsibility of up to 3 months, and you're just basically playing at that structure, at that level, right? And then as you start to build the business, you prove product market fit, or and sometimes proving product market fit doesn't mean that someone's actually buying what you're selling. Sometimes it means you have someone who's buying your vision, right? So you get an investor, right? I've got this big idea. It's like, ChatGPT. How long was that basically a company, right? A genuine company with no product or service that was making any revenue, right? So they had product market fit, maybe not in the marketplace of selling something, but they had product market fit in the marketplace of being able to raise capital. So I think there's a nuance there on product market fit. But, at first it's just everybody's trying to figure out product market fit. And then all of a sudden you're confident that you can go hire people and then they can be working on the sort of the 1 day to 3 months work. And then you can start focusing on, 3 months to a year. You can start focusing on hiring people. You can start focusing on structuring the organization. Maybe there's a sales and marketing organization. There's ops, there's finance, whatever. Some of it's fractional, some of it's full time. You figure all that stuff out. So that's sort of stage 2 of a company. You've now added that second layer. And that's how it works, right? So stage 3 is now you have people who are overseeing, maybe people who are doing the operations, people who are doing the marketing, and they're reporting to you. So you're at the level 3. They're at that stratum 2 is what Elliot would call it. And you have other folks at stratum 1. That stratum 3 work is anywhere from 1 year to 2 years out, right? You're now bringing in people, you're getting people to start dividing and conquering, maybe expanding the dividing. So maybe you had sales and marketing together, and now you have a sales leader, and now you have a marketing leader, right? And you start to expand the number of core functions that the organization has. So now you get to that's sort of stage 3 business. You're sitting at that third stratum up or the third level up, and then all of a sudden now you can go and you can move to stage 4 company where you're focusing out 2 to 5 years, and you're literally hiring like department leaders, and they have team leaders, and then the teams obviously have individuals. And so the structure evolves as stages of development evolve, and I believe that you have a stage 5 company. When you have a stage 5 company, that's really when you have a company that could be potentially sold to someone or handed off to another leadership team, because now you're focused on the 5 to 10 years. You've got maybe either C-suite or a chief operating officer focused on the 2 to 5. You got department heads focusing on the 1 to 2. You got team leaders, and then you have individual contributors. Getting structure right is really about understanding the stage you're at. And now that you got structure right, now, of course, ultimately what you need to do is figure out, what are the core functions that are necessary for you to have at this stage of development, and then what are all the seats down below. And then you start to sort of create what almost looks like a pegboard, right? So you have columns, which are your core functions, and then you have rows, which represent the time span associated with the objectives associated with the seats, and then within each of the seats you have roles, accountabilities, and responsibilities. And without understanding the roles, accountabilities, and responsibilities, you can't understand what the required skills and experiences and competencies are associated with those things. So that's why you got to get structure before you go hire people. And there's more to it, but I'll stop at this moment.
Yeah. And go all the way sort of back.
Yeah.
In talking about the things that you need to be aware of before you get to that appropriate stage where structure really matters and you're advancing through the stages.
Yeah.
And going from being a business to a company. It matters having that context and being aware of how the structure works
and how it will evolve,
even
and what the implications are in terms of the people you're hiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you start advancing without being aware of these things, or being ignorant of the upcoming needs of the company,
right,
that's going to put you in a bad spot.
Yeah. It's like you're the beauty of understanding structure is it's a guide to the game, right? It's like going off and crossing the United States without any map, as an example, going from New York to LA. How hard is that, right, if you didn't have a map? Whereas if you have a map and you have a GPS, now all of a sudden, right, it's significantly easier to, and now I know, okay, so this is where I'm going. This is, you have a sense for just, how to more efficiently get from here to there.
And it's easier to get from here to there now because we have infrastructure.
Yeah.
You just go on the interstate and go.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't there, rewind 200 years.
Or even if GPS wasn't here, right? And you're like, well, the difference between, a local road with stoplights or stop signs. I mean, versus being able to just go. Understanding, all that stuff, right? Understanding where gas stations are, right? There's just, right?
And then that's a whole other conversation sort of about frameworks. Because once you understand these things, where the gas stations are going to be, where everything's going to lie, and how to get to the interstate, and what goes where.
And you're not freaking out about, I don't know when a gas station's going to come up, and so are you filling your gas tank up every, right when it's down a quarter of a tank because you just don't know? I mean, it's just hard and anxious, and so understanding structure enables you to just sort of navigate those stages. With confidence, and then as a leader, especially as an ambitious founder, right? You want to be able to make these decisions with confidence, and you want to be able to explain why you're doing the things that you're doing, and you want to be able to anticipate that next stage and what's the implications. Like you may go out and hire a bunch of people that you think are going to be great for getting you to stage 5, but they've actually never done it, and so you didn't really think through, and you told them they could be head of marketing. I'm just making this up. But, all of a sudden it's like, well, that wasn't very bright.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I promised that to you.
You're kind of making agreements there without any confidence, right?
Yeah.
And there's no free lunch with anything.
Yeah.
But this is as much of that as you can realistically get.
Or let's talk about that one, right? You maybe you're overly confident, and so you're basically turning into a con person.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have the evidence for the confidence.
Boom, 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 and all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second, you told me this, and well, that's what I thought was right. You can't get away with that too many times with your people.
No, well, that's a trust issue.
Yeah.
And on the spectrum of confidence, you're careful to your arrogant.
Yeah.
Right. Because
or foolish.
Well, either way, you're going to be foolish.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be overly conservative, and then you're not going to progress or anything. You're not going to be ambitious. So if that's your thing, right, you need to actually earn that confidence and have that stack of evidence to prove that. And then you don't be careful, you be confident.
Yeah. And if you don't, I was sharing this with someone very recently, right? this isn't about frameworks today, right? But the beauty of frameworks is the ones you use should be time tested. You can explain them. You can explain why they work, right? That you could, and lots of frameworks are actually developed so that you can visually explain something. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so, a great structure framework is visual. It makes things very understandable, and it makes for conversations that sometimes are hard much easier, right? It's like, this is let's just call it a Stratum 3 seat, and let's just do a Stratum 2 seat. This is a Stratum 2 seat. You need to be able to, it has a bunch of objectives, and you need to be able to consistently and predictably be able to meet these objectives. And you say to us, and someone's sitting in a Stratum 1 seat, and you say, hey, if you want to get in, be able to sit in this seat, you need to demonstrate that, like as an example, you need to demonstrate that you can 3 quarters in a row bring in some rocks without a lot of close supervision, where I have confidence you have the ability to meet an objective that has at least 90 days. You have the ability to understand processes. You have the ability to be able to follow up. You have the ability to live up to your agreements, right? You have the ability to understand the more complicated things that are associated with sort of Stratum 2 objectives versus Stratum 1 objectives. And then they either get it done. It's like, awesome, right? Welcome to the next game, next stage of the next level of the game, or not. And then it's like, okay, yeah, no, I don't care. I'm not really willing to sort of invest in that. I don't care enough to learn the things. I'd rather just, and that's cool too.
It applies, it sort of gives an objective approach to an often emotional discussion and situation.
Yeah.
And we do see a lot of people try to go for that and then realize that's not for them.
Yeah.
They don't want to manage people. They don't want to be thinking this far out, and they just really like what they do, and they want to own that.
Yeah. And they do amazing work, and then all of a sudden they're more at peace with, right? Because, I think Gallup showed recently 64% of people never want to manage people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. In college, it's always, training the leaders of tomorrow and everything.
Yeah.
But you look around those rooms and you see that a lot of those people want to be a leader because they're told they want to be a leader.
Yeah.
But few people really want to take on the responsibility associated with being the type of leader that they have in mind.
Right.
And I think it's an interesting journey and maturity to watch people realize that.
Yeah.
Going back to the core structure discussion, where do you see, through your coaching and just observation, where do you see companies and businesses get it wrong and go down the right path, or just not identify their struggles and attribute that to a structural issue?
Adding layers is a huge one, right? That's one huge one. We can talk about that one. Basically structuring around people as opposed to structuring, a very specific, as opposed to doing structure first, people second. So that's a huge, huge one a lot of times, because that doesn't scale, right? Every human's unique. And it's a knock-on effect. But those are the two big ones, right? It's creating unnecessary layers, because ultimately those unnecessary layers, those are the first things that get whacked whenever things slow down, or whenever people are focusing on getting super efficient, like has happened over the last 15 months or so in the broader economy, especially with larger companies. You hear about middle managers, right? And those middle management layers are layers that never should have been put there. But everybody wants to matter, and one of the ways you measure how you matter is titles and compensation. And so, if you don't have a really solid framework for structure, all of a sudden, you give someone this seat that's not Stratum 2 or Stratum 3, then others do it, and then others do it, and all of a sudden, right, or you do the title thing, and all of a sudden you have this really people-driven, not structure-driven organizational chart. And what happens then is that you have these shadow organizations, because those people tend to be sitting in, a lot of times they get leadership positions, but they're not sufficiently superior in terms of experience and competency as they need to really be an effective leader, where the people below them or report to them want to follow them. They're like, you don't know much better, more than I do, or worse, right? I think I know more than you do. So, so in the end, it creates a lot of dysfunction when you have unnecessary stratums. And then, of course, as I was getting into, if you structure around people, it's not scalable. And then, they're going to have things probably that you want in that seat, but they're going to have a bunch of things that you don't want, or they don't have things that you want in that seat. So now you're compensating by having other seats compensate, and the whole thing just gets really messed up because you didn't do structure first. You went around a person, but that person, like all of us, have strengths and weaknesses and flat spots and are missing certain competencies. And so now what do you do, right? Okay, let's put it over here. Let's put it over. So the whole thing gets weird. And now all of a sudden you have all these seats that, frankly, there's not even a market for those people. I mean, when I say that, what I mean is you have these seats, but they're not seats you can go out into the marketplace and if the person leaves, you can't just go out and get that person. That person doesn't exist, right? Because it was so unique. And so, it's like a head of email marketing as an example, but they're not, right? So you're like, okay, so do I hire this person to replace them or this person to replace them? And so it makes it so much harder. So, those are the two big issues. It's structuring around people, and it's creating layerings. And then the other one is titles, right? It just, that all of a sudden creates all this just drama and noise that obviously I have it's like, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, and if you look on LinkedIn, you think of it as title inflation.
Yeah.
And how that's changed over the last, I don't know, it feels like 5 years.
Yeah.
It feels like it's gotten significantly different, where someone's a senior or something, associate thing, and it's like that's an entry level manager role, or you're an intern kind of a thing. But right, that's a thing. And then with forming the seats around people, and the two issues you said, one being you get it so weird and right, where it's just really focused around that, and it doesn't really make objective sense.
Right.
And if you want to replace it, then that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And
worse, by the way, now all of a sudden, right, you have this unique person sitting in a seat that cannot be replicated, right? You can't go find that person. And I mean, I don't think it's healthy for an organization to have a dependency upon some unique human being that you can't replace, because all of a sudden, maybe they drink some funny fluid, right? And they get kind of weird on you. And now all of a sudden they're irreplaceable and they're not working out. How's that going to, that's not a fun place to be. Right?
And if you have a person that's a superstar, don't make the seat change to accommodate that person's amazing, superior traits.
Right.
But if you can benefit from that in the meantime, but as long as you don't change the structure around that, then, right, because you're going to have situations where you're going to have a person that exceeds the nature of the seat.
Right.
And then you can plan around that.
Right.
But don't compromise the nature of the structure in the organization to work around that.
Yeah, because it just makes it so much harder to scale, right? It makes it actually makes the organization less resilient, obviously, right? And it makes actually recruiting and onboarding to replace that person, that's like, there's no playbook anymore, right? But if you got structure right and all the seats make sense and there's seats that exist within the marketplace, right? Now, it makes onboarding, recruiting and onboarding so much more efficient, makes the whole scaling of the organization so much more efficient, makes the organization so much more resilient, right? And it makes having conversations a heck of a lot easier.
Right, you have those middle managers. Obviously, that's a pain on efficiency, and I think we see a lot of that recently. This could be a whole other discussion, but in administrative roles, in both large organizations and universities and government, but that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
But the inefficiency and cost and shifting of the objectives of the organization that are created by putting those middle managers in who basically just fill that seat
Right.
and don't know anything or don't know any better than the people that report to them.
Yeah. Everyone wants to matter, right? And so when when you hire people not around structure, so this gets into another thing, right? Which is, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to hire amazingly talented people and I'm going to figure out where to put them. But that doesn't work, right? Because everyone wants to matter. And if it's really smart, amazingly talented, driven human being comes in, but there's no seat for them, what's going to happen?
Well, obviously you're going to be unhappy, unfulfilled, and
Or
leave. Or they're going to take over and screw it up.
yeah, they're going to try to figure out how to matter, and they're going to go step on someone else's toes, right? They're going to make so it just it just doesn't work, right? Hiring without intent, hiring people first, structure second, doesn't work because everybody wants to matter, and you're either going to waste your money because they're just going to sit there twiddling their fingers, which they're not, because they, like we already said, they're talented people, they're ambitious, right? Or they're going to go figure out how to create value, but they're going to go figure out how to create value in an organization where everybody knows who's responsible for what. So it just either way is not a good way.
And even if they aren't as ambitious but super talented, high potential, they're not going to be doing good work if they're not in a
Right.
position to,
Yeah.
right? They don't have that structure that provides the freedom to be creative,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
not good for anything.
Right. Because you're not, what authority are you going to give them?
You're like, just
Right.
go do things. And I'm like,
Yeah. Right.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's messed up.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's another reason for structure first, people second.
It's a good discussion.
Is that the whole session?
Yeah, that's it.
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah. So, right?
Cool.
See you next time on People.
All right. Looking forward to it.